The system is broken up into three parts. It has the statistics section, the mapping section, and the high crash location section. And I think all of these can apply differently to everybody at different times. You may be looking for certain pieces of information from one area rather than another, depending on who or what you're working for, or what you're doing. Um, the other thing that I want to preface is about the advanced user option. You may or may not have heard about that. The advanced user option is it's a simple process of simply coming in when you first open it up. You hit the advanced user login. You select I'm a new user. At that point, you're going to put in your email, re-enter your email, first name, last name, and then the type of user that you are. Put in your contact number. You're going to create a password and re-enter your password. Now, with this one thing the other thing I'll preface is that with this system, there is not, unfortunately, a very good option for regaining access to your passwords. So if you don't write them down and you forget them, at this point in time, and the developer is working on a process where I'll get a notification, I can reset your passwords, but that hasn't been developed yet. The only way to get your password reset is I have to delete your account. So you'd have to contact me through email. I'd have to delete your account, and then we'd have to create you a new account and go through the process over again. So I always like to tell people to make sure that you write your password down. So once you get all your information in there, you'll create a new user. At that point, you would have access to the basic user options. At that point, I would get an email, or you could contact me if you haven't seen that you've had the advanced user options. At that point, I can update your account. I'm going to log myself in right now so that we have all of the options available to us. And yeah, here's a good thing I always like to mention too, this verification code thing here. I always like to make sure that I have one that I can actually read before I get started with this thing, because if you log in incorrectly too many times, it will lock you out. Okay. So as I mentioned, we've got the three areas. We're going to start out with the statistics section. And as I mentioned, the advanced user options are very simple. It allows you the ability to set intersections or set sections of roads when you wanted to look at particular areas, so that you could look at sections of road or just certain intersections. Um, the one thing to note about the sections is that it'll do just the actual sections of the road. So you could do multiple sections of a road, and it'll do all of the sections, but it won't give you the crash information for any of the intersections. The intersections would later have to be done individually on their own. So please keep that in mind when you're doing this. There is this nice little tool up here called the important user notes, and it opens up a little Adobe, and blow it up a little bit just so you can see it a little bit better. And it's just a set of instructions to help you navigate the tool. It's very basic, but it helps show you a lot of the different icons and things, and what the selecting different options will do for you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. So I guess what we'll do is first we'll work on a road section before we begin anything. So, or an intersection, excuse me. So and if you do anything wrong, it'll always let you know that you're doing something wrong, which is always a nice option. So I've got to do a city or town, and in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just select I'm going to go with Portland. And as you work in this, you'll start typing the word and it'll populate for you. And now I can set my section, my intersections. Okay. One unfortunate part about this as well is this isn't exactly the map viewer, but in order to work in these, you actually need to understand the map viewer a little bit. So we're going to be working in a particular intersection that I know, and I'm going to kind of go to it right now. That way I can get that particular information. And what you're looking for your intersection is you're going to need your routes. And a lot of these times with these, it's not an obvious road name. It's not necessarily a route name. A lot of times they're what we call road inversions. So they're small city roads. They're not state-owned roads. So the map viewer helps us identify those. And the way that does that is if we click on that, it'll actually give us this route code right here. So this is Congress Street, and it gives us the route code of 0560160. That 05 is just a significant, it's an identifier for the Cumberland County. Then we can go back and we can look for that 05 6. I already forgot the number. 0560160. 60. And then it's going to ask us for the section intersection, and we have to do the same thing again. So we need to know that this one is Route 77, which that'll be a little bit easier to find that one as it's a state route. And the other thing is now that we've selected an intersection, it's only going to allow us to select any of the roads that would intersect with that road that we've previously selected. And we're looking at it's doing it by streets, of course, so it's not going by the route number. And we're looking for State Street. State Street. It would be nice if this was alphabetical, but it's not. Right there. So the intersection of Congress and State. So we've got that set. We're looking at a single year right now. So we've selected our city of town, which you have to do in order to do either of these intersections or sections. And we're looking at just 1 year. It's a single year right now. So it's broken into 5 different areas. Your step 1 is whether you're going to do a city or town, a police department, select by their agency, then your years. Then you're going to go down and select if you want to do a different type of crash, your injury levels that you may want to specify by, and we're not doing any of those. We're just going to do a full. So right now you can see we've got 3 crashes at this intersection that we've selected. This breaks this into different areas and gives you different graphs. You're going to have a total. It's going to break it down by month. The crashes by the day of the week, time of day, and you can scroll down through these, or you can select down through them with these little tabs up above, which will take you through the different areas, type of crash that they were, 2 rear end side swipes, 1 intersection movement. Then it gets into some driver information, the drivers of the vehicles by their sex or gender, or by their age. And then you've got some vehicle information and some injury information. And again, you can scroll through all this, or you can simply just go back and forth using these little options right here. And I'm going to go back to the top for the total. So that's how that works. I was going to we'll do a multi-year on this one as well. So if you wanted to do a multi-year, and that's why I knew that looked strange when I ran that. I'm going to run this again. I did it for 2023, and I had intended to do it for 2022. So 2022 to 2023, it changes. You can see there are more crashes added to a single year for just 2022. Seven crashes. So you can see it had 3 crashes in 2023, 3 more crashes in 2022. And you just keep kind of building your data. One other thing I like to mention too is whenever I have people request crash reports from me personally, for a 5-year or a 3-year report, we never include this current year of 2023 because the crashes are still ongoing. The crashes for the year are not finalized. So whenever we do a crash report, we only use a finalized year. So everything would be 2022 and earlier. So if I was to do a 3-year one, it would go from 2020 to 2022, not 2023. That doesn't mean you can't use this tool to get current data. It just means that it's not going to be as accurate as you'd like it to be. So from 2020 to 2022, for that 3-year period at this intersection in Portland, there were 16 crashes. I guess next we'll move on. That's intersections. I mean, I could show you more years. For this tool, the trends doesn't necessarily really work. It's not as good. That's more when you start using some of the other things and not necessarily the sections of the intersections. So we'll try a section this time. And when you do a section, and I'm in Portland again, this means you're going to have to pick a city. And again, you're going to have to rely on that map viewer a little bit. So you can see up here, it says highways can commonly be identified, because this doesn't give you a drop down like the other one is. So this is going to rely on you starting to type in the information that you're looking for, and then it's going to pre-populate it. So the area that I'm going to be doing this section on is going to be along Congress Street again, in a similar area to where we were looking at before. So it's going to be, excuse me, yeah. I'm going to do the road conversion 0506160. Correct. Oh, that's not once. Those numbers right. There we go. And then it'll ask you for a beginning and ending mile point. And for this one, you know, it limits you so that you don't get any area that would typically be outside of that area. So these are the restrictions on that particular road. It begins at 0.05 of a mile, and then it ends at 2.36 miles. So we wouldn't be able to get anything outside of that. But I'm going to start it with an offset of 1.66 and an ending offset of 1.75. I'm going to add that. Right, so that information's in there. Close that. Now that I've got my Portland, my intersection, I'm going to submit my query. Okay. And so this is for 2012. That was the other thing I was going to do. I was going to do it for a little bit longer period of time. I wanted to change so I'm going to do it for a 5-year rather than a 3-year. 3-year was 2020 to 2022. This is going to be a 5-year. So we'll do it for a little bit longer. And so this creates 22 crashes for us. And it's from this area right here, 1.66 to 1.65. And so that's the basic gist of doing the intersections and the sections. It allows you to look at more areas. Again, the area that I included you was only one section of road, so it didn't include multiple intersections in between it. For instance, if we went back to our map viewer, what we were looking at was just this section of road right here from 16818 to 16210. If you include more of these intersections here, it would give you all the crashes along each one of these routes, but it wouldn't give you any of the crashes at these intersections. You'd have to run those again separately afterwards. You know, and I think the reason the developer did that when we made the system is he didn't want folks to be, because everything's lumped together, he didn't want folks to be confused as to whether they had information for the intersections or whether they had information for the roads. So here you've got all the information for the roads, and then you can run your intersections separately. Oop, that's the map viewer. So now that we've gone over those two areas, I'm going to delete that, get out of that. Okay, so that's pretty much all I'm going to really touch on today on the difference between the advanced and the basic user. Primarily everything else that we're going to kind of do here is basic user stuff. And we're just going to run through a few different scenarios, looking at some different data. Again, we'll do a statewide. Let's do it for a single year first. Let's just do 2022 rather than doing that many. The larger the amount of information you have, the longer it takes for the system to run. As it is for doing a statewide with all crashes, it's probably going to take a little bit of time for this to run. And a lot of times it'll pop up with a little notification telling you that it's going to take a little while to run because of the amount of data that it's going to produce. We usually have between 30 and 35,000 reportable crashes in the state of Maine a year. So this thing's the system's gonna filter through all 30 something thousand of those to get us our exact data. And there it is. So for 2022, we had 33,932 crashes around the state. Again, as I was showing you folks earlier, you can look at all of this information, breaks it down to you by, what day of the week they happened, what day of the month they happened. Sometimes you're looking for crash information, you're just looking for peak season, you're looking from May or June until August, that's the area you're focusing on. So it allows you to look at that data in some different areas. The next thing I guess I'll show is the export data. And when you select that export data button, what it does is it creates an Excel file for you in a CSV format. And here's what that format looks like. So it's basically breaking down all of those graphs. It's breaking it out for you into individual Excel files, so you have the information for each one. And then you can do that as you will. Maybe you don't like the way the graphs are set up there. You can use this data, or maybe you don't even want a graph. Maybe you just want the raw numbers, and you can get that information right here by exporting it to an Excel file. You can also print this data. It lets you know that you got to switch the orientation to landscape, otherwise stuff's going to get cut off. So you can see, basically, you need to change it to landscape. That way you get all of and that's not even doing it. My scale must be blown up here. Oh yeah, 135. So you can print off these graphs if you wanted to. That's a quick one, just doing a statewide. Now we'll start breaking this down a little finer. I think for this one, instead of just looking at statewide, maybe we'll go by we'll do a county. So when you select county, start typing in your county. I'm going to do Kennebec County. I type the KEN in, it does that. We've done a single year, a 3-year. I think we even did a 5-year. Maybe this time let's do a 10-year. So 10 years would be 2013 to 2022. And we'll just look at that right now, just because we've added the county feature. We'll just add that in. We won't add any more detail to that. Well, that can't be right, is it? Oh, I think it is. Yeah. Yep. So for Kennebec County, and this is combining it over a 10-year period. I was looking at it thinking it produces, it's almost the same exact numbers what we had for 1 year statewide. It threw me off a little bit. So you can see kind of the data we get looking at a countywide, breaking it down again by the different days of the week and everything. One unfortunate part of this is it's lumping it all together. So you may be saying to yourself, well, what if I wanted to look at this information from 1 year to the next? I mean, I know I have all this data for 2013 to 22. What if I want to know exactly what happened in Kennebec County in 2018? You could run it by year if you wanted to, but you could also get that data by running it by trends. So you can run things by trends, and when you submit that query, what it's going to do is it's going to plot that information out into a trend graph, and it'll give you the information per year this time instead of populating it out as a lump sum. So yeah, as you can see, so this breaks down each year for Kennebec County. So if you ever needed to get that data by year, you don't have to run them individually. You can still do a 10-year, but this breaks it out for you so you can see how everything happens 1 year at a time, which is another nice feature of this tool. I guess we'll go back to doing, we'll stick with the trends. We'll do another multi-year one, but instead of looking at all of this information, let's maybe, let's change up the crash information by injury level. Let's look at some different injury information. So let's maybe go to 2018 to 22, 5 years injury crashes for Kennebec County. Let's submit that query and see what that generates for us. Oop, I'm still in trends. I hadn't intended to do that, but that's all right. We've got just additional information. I'm going to run it as a So for Kennebec County between 2018 and 22, you can see we had 3,721 crashes by injury crashes for all types of crashes. Um, Again, just looking at different details. Maybe you wanted to look at and another thing, these injury crashes. So these would be um, suspected serious injury crashes, suspected minor injury crashes, and possible injury crashes. Those are the three areas of injuries that we specify. Those are A, B, and C injury levels. And then you've got your property damage crashes, which means there was no actual injury to anybody. The only thing that happened was there was damage to property. Or you can look at fatal injury crashes as well. And you see this little indicator right here, this FARS. So what that's saying is these fatal crashes are based on the FARS reporting system, which is a federally recognized NHTSA system. So the Bureau of Highway Safety regulates whether or not a certain crash is counted as a fatal crash. They work together with NHTSA. They do that each year. The FARS fatal crashes haven't actually been finalized even for 2022 yet. They'll be finalized for 2022 at the end of this year. They're always a year behind what we're looking at. But it's the FARS is the Fatal Analysis Reporting System, I think is what the acronym stands for. And so the Bureau of Highway Safety or the Department of Public Safety, they're both kind of the same entity. They're the ones who dictate what fatal crashes are, what crashes they determine to be a fatal crash. And you might be saying, well, how could a crash not be a fatal crash if somebody was killed in it? Sometimes crashes happen where somebody may have died of an actual medical event. You know, they had a heart attack. They went off the road and they died. They died not necessarily as a result of the crash itself, but of the medical event. And so that particular crash wouldn't be counted in this system. Granted, there was a crash, somebody died, but the reason they died wasn't because of the crash itself. And would they have even had that crash if it hadn't been for that medical event? So NHTSA, National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, and the Bureau of Highway Safety, they get together and they determine what crashes are FARS. And another thing to mention about this is we can run one of these just quick, like, you know, we can look at statewide fatal crashes for 5 years. This information you've got to take with a grain of salt, because unfortunately, when you get into fatal data, sometimes the reports aren't in here because they count certain crashes that aren't on what we call our state network or our state system or what is mapped on this system. They happen on small dirt roads. They may happen in parking lots sometimes. And they still count those crashes, but we can't count those here. So if you ever have a question about whether or not the fatal crash information that you're getting is accurate, you always want to check with the Bureau of Highway Safety. Don't just take what you get on this system. When I do my data and I get fatal information, I always have to run it through them first before I can actually publish anything, because they're the ones who dictate that information. And sometimes my numbers, because sometimes crashes happen off system, sometimes they're on system, sometimes those numbers don't quite jive. So always make sure to check with the Bureau of Highway Safety when it comes to fatal crash information, if that's a particular interest to you, depending on what you're doing. So that's statewide for 5 years. We can look at that based on trends as well, just to kind of see how those fatal crashes each year break down. So you can see these are the fatal crashes that happen in these years. And I know just as an example, a crash that happened here, there were actually 172 fatal crashes in 2022. Currently is what they're counting. And so this one is off by one because of one crash that happened, and it's a weird circumstance, but the number should actually be one higher. But unfortunately, it's not in the system. It'll never be in the system. And the only way this particular thing creates these numbers is crashes that are in the system. So it is one downfall of this. Again, that's why I preface, anything that you're doing that may be fatal related, You can run your numbers through here, but I would check them with the Bureau of Highway Safety before you really, commit to any of that type of data as far as fatal numbers are concerned. I can show you, we've also got step 6, which we haven't gone through any of that yet. We'll do a quick one of those. We'll maybe change this up and we'll look at a 3-year, 2020 to 2022. We'll change up the type of crash. So you can see all these different types of crashes here. Pedestrians is one. That's always a good one to run. One-off roads are always a one that people tend to want to have information about. When you're looking at one-off road crashes, a lot of people want to know about, injury crashes. And with a lot of one-off road crashes, speeding is typically involved. So we've included not only section 4, but also section 6 as well. So we're looking at, for 3 years, I want that to be a multi-year, a type of crash where a vehicle went off road, there was speeding involved, and you can see that, there's just a lot of different information that you can generate using this tool. You can start getting things really specific about the types of things that you're looking at. You can see 2,079 over that 3-year period. There were 2,079 injury crashes. So where somebody had an injury, whether it was a serious injury, a minor injury, or a possible injury, there was an injury involved in that crash. And all of them involve speeding. And speeding is broken down into 2 categories where a driver is either considered to be exceeding the posted speed limit or they're considered to be driving too fast for conditions. So those 2 criteria meet in all of these crashes statewide for just off-road crashes. So that's just one particular type of crash. We were also, I had mentioned before about the pedestrians. Pedestrians are the ones that folks always seem to want to know about. People are always curious about pedestrian crashes because it seems like we have more and more we're dealing with our vulnerable users, being struck. And let's do this in a city just to make it a little more interesting. I like to use Portland because there's typically a lot of good information from Portland related to pedestrians. We don't want them just related to speeding. We'll do all crashes, and we'll submit that query in the city of Portland. So 509 from 2013 to 2022. So I mean that's a lot of pedestrian crashes, and you could always break that out by trend so you can see what's happening each year because it's 10 years. It's a lot. How many are occurring each year just in the city of Portland. And this will break it down to you year to year. This is all 509 over those different years. You can see 2020, you're going to notice that a lot when you're doing any of these things. 2020 was a low year. It was the pandemic year. The amount of traffic volume we had on the roads was drastically lower, but the amount of crashes that we had was also way down. And you can see in 2014 was the highest year that we had pedestrian crashes in the city of Portland. Again, some nice little figures to look at. So we've looked at a lot of the stuff here as far as the statistical information, and I think now what we can do is move on to some of the mapping stuff. So we'll move to the maps. Let's do maybe, so we'll do a county one. Do Kennebec County. Let's do, say, maybe we'll do a 10-year again. We've already got that set. I don't think I want to specify the type of crash on this one. And let's do injury crashes. I think we did a similar one to this when we did our other data. Okay, so you can see those dots which are produced. Get this out of here. When you do this, it gives you a little pop-up about viewing the map. It tells you the tips to using them. So you can kind of scroll in. You get closer. Each one of these dots is a location. This is an exact location. So if you select that one, it'll give you this information. Now, this is one of the other differences between a basic and advanced user option. With basic, you would get this. With the advanced, you get a little bit more. So it gives you a little more information. There's not a lot to find out in this one, but sometimes there'll be distracted driver information. Driver actions, what'll be listed in there is typically, if impairment was involved. and their condition or actions would be speeding. Excuse me, that would be speeding, and condition at time of crash. That would indicate where a driver may have been impaired related to that crash. So if you didn't have the advanced user options, you wouldn't get those extra tidbits there. So you can keep zooming in. Each time you click on one of those, it takes you a little closer. This is where those two were that were a bubble that had a 2 on it. And you can change the view from just what we're looking at to a satellite view as well, which is always nice. And then say you wanted to get down in this area right here, you were curious about that. You grab this little guy here, you drag him over, get yourself a little street view. And you can pan around and see exactly where that pedestrian crash happened. And if you got to go back, just click that little arrow right there. I'll show that to you again, just in case, so you don't click right out of the whole thing, because that's what you would think you'd need to do. Just click this little arrow next to that route, and it takes you back to the screen. So those are kind of some of the things that you get when you're looking at this tool. I'm going to turn the satellite back off. I don't typically tend to leave it turned on when I'm doing this. I thought something looked weird. Try this again, because I thought I was doing a multi-year, 10-year query, and I was only actually doing a 1 year. I knew 761 didn't sound quite right for crashes in Kennebec County. That looks a little bit better. 7550 and 7546. And here's another thing that I'm going to point out to you. The 7550 right here, it's the number of returned crashes. So that's the number of crashes that you would find in your statistic information. The 7546 is the number of crashes that can be mapped on our system. So what it's saying is we had an extra 4 crashes that we actually couldn't locate in our system. So when you do your statistics, you get all of the information. When you do it on a map, it's only going to give you the information that can actually map. So there's 4 crashes that are actually missing, which that isn't a whole lot of crashes, but you know, there are a couple missing. So I just kind of wanted to point that out as well. And I guess maybe we can take a closer look at, you know, well, if I've got some missing, you know, what does that mean? What's that percentage? 4 crashes out of 7550? It's not very high. So, you know, it's not something to be necessarily overly concerned with. Let's do like a statewide single year, maybe. 2022 crashes. Submit query. Okay, so we've got our crashes are all mapped here. Again, we can zoom into the different bubbles to look at them, but kind of what I would guess I was going to focus on here was this number of crashes returned as opposed to the number of crashes that can be mapped. So there are 5 missing here. Say you wanted to kind of get a better idea where those might be, you could kind of whittle down your information. You could maybe look by that information by county. And I happened to do this beforehand, so I could find out, for instance, if I typed in Penobscot County and I ran this crash information again, submit the query. This indicates here that 2 of the crashes that were missing were in Penobscot County, which, you know, that's good. But what if I wanted to know maybe what type of crash they were? Maybe, and again, I know this, so I'm still in Penobscot County. And I just happen to know that both types were deer crashes. So that's where both of those missing crashes were. They were both deer crashes. So maybe deer crashes aren't even part of your analysis, you know, so the information that's missing from this map may not be something of particular interest to you. I was just kind of showing you how you can kind of whittle down that information as to what your missing crashes are. So, I mean, 5 crashes missing from this map over 33,000, you know, almost 34,000 crashes. I don't even think it's like just barely 1/10 of or 1/100th of a percent. It's a very small amount. So it's not like your information's drastically different. Trying to think, the other unfortunate part of this is all of this information is, you know, these maps are really nice. That data is all good, but there's not really any way to export it like your statistical stuff. which is a bit of a drawback of this system. You can print it, but I'll be honest, I've done this in the past. The options you get for the print aren't really user friendly. So the mapping is going to be something where it's going to give you an idea. I mean, you can't even, when you look at one of these, say you click on this one, you get, some property damage time of day. You can't even extract that data. That's pretty much all I'm going to cover for the map section. We'll go over the high crash location section very quick. And this can be done again. And this is not, the sections and intersections is not specific to advanced users. That's just specific to the way high crash locations are run. So the high crash locations are either run by sections of road or intersections. You can run them statewide. You can run them by the city or town, the county, but you set the year. Now, the year that you set, that year is going to be I believe it's the last of the 3 years in a 3-year study period. I should probably go over that as far as what a high crash location is. A high crash location is an intersection or section of road for a 3-year study period that has 8 or more crashes and a critical rate factor of 1.00 or higher. And some of you may know what that information is, some of you may not. And you might be saying, well, what's a critical rate factor? I guess the best way to describe or explain a critical rate factor is it's a statistical figure, and it's based on the number, the crash rate, which is the crashes that actually happen over a specific period of time, compared to the critical rate, which is the crashes that we expect to see happen over a period of time. Those two figures are divided into one another, and that 1.00, so that's 1 time more that crashes are occurring than what we would expect them to see. So anytime that it's happening 1 time more than what we would expect it to see over that 1.00 3-year period, 8 or more crashes, that's what constitutes a high crash location. So it's an area we might say, okay, that's an area, we may want to take a look at. There's more crashes happening there than what we would expect to see happen. Why is that? So it's just a tool. So I guess I'll just do a quick one here. We'll just do in intersections, and we'll do it by a county rather than going into the entire state. We'll do Androscoggin. And so this is set for intersections for a county for 2022, which is what we would call 2020. And you can see it tells you what years that 3-year study period is right here from 2020 to 22. And that's what we would call the current 3-year study period. Now it breaks it down alphabetically by town, but you can change all these things here by how you want to sort this stuff. So maybe you don't want to look at it by town, or maybe you want to look at it backwards by town. By clicking each of these, we'll change that. So maybe you want to see, that's the lowest number of crashes. That's the highest number of crashes. That's the lowest number of injury. That's the highest number of injury. And that's or percent injury, excuse me. And you can look at it by the highest or lowest number of injuries as well. This one, we can export our data again. So we can send that out to an Excel file. And again, it breaks it up just as we saw it on the screen. It gives us our number of crashes, our percent injuries, our fatalities. So you can get that data exported right there, which is nice. And so that is primarily what I'm going to be showing you folks for today for the public query tool.